All right, so today we are joined by Yossi Knecht of Atlantis Strength, a Canadian-based gym equipment manufacturer. Yossi is the director of sales. As I noticed that I've got my sweater in the way, he is the director of sales within North America for Atlantis Strength. He's been with the company for a number of years. So Yossi, tell us a little bit more about you, how you fit in with Atlantis, and tell us what exactly is Atlantis Strength.
Thanks, Tony. So yeah, I'm the director of North American sales. I've been with Atlantis. It'll be actually 15 years in just a few weeks. Very exciting, especially for a guy who had not stayed at a company for more than 3 years prior to that. I found. There's a long story as to why I got into this business and sales in this business, but I love the industry. It's super interesting and exciting, and it makes it very fun to work every day. As director of sales for North America, essentially I'm the liaison between customers and the company back to customers, right? I'm in the middle, and I try to bring the Atlantis message to customers. We work mostly through distributors. We don't have a direct sales force. We work with distributors. So my job is to find, develop, and optimize distributors. We have some great ones in North America. The one thing that's really fun about the industry is that most people are in it, as I say, on purpose. Like, it's not like, well, I finished college and then I had to get a job, and I got a job at an equipment, company. Or most people have a passion for training and health and all that. So having, as I alluded to earlier, having worked in many industries, because I started working pretty young, part-time jobs when I was 13, and then working full-time as of, almost 30 years now. It's not something that's common. I don't know that everyone in our industry knows that, because a lot of the guys, I would imagine most of the people that are, in this Q&A or will watch this Q&A are people who kind of were involved with athletics and training and then have only ever done it. But it's something really cool. And I actually, obviously things can change, but I can't imagine not being in this industry. Like, it's just a lot of fun. With Atlantis, so as I was trying to get into the industry, because I was trying on purpose, I actually called every manufacturer and introduced myself and so on. And I happened to find out that Atlantis was based in my hometown of Montreal. And at the time I reached out to them, they didn't have a position, but I was actually interviewing companies, and I made a good impression on the sales manager at the time. And when they decided to look for someone, I was lucky enough to get the job. Atlantis is really interesting to me. And what's really cool about our company is that we are a smaller company. And so again, if I add my personal story, right before Atlantis, I worked at Bombardier Aerospace. So, most of the people outside of Canada will probably not know that name, but it's a, big company, manufactures airplanes. And so, like, just the building I worked in had 5,000 employees. And that was just a building I worked in. Like, you had to like create tricks or ways to remember where you parked your car. Like, I remember the first day I walked out into the parking lot and I was like, I hadn't paid attention. It took me half an hour to find my car. So that's how big that was. And actually, it didn't work for my personality. For one, it was pretty hierarchical. So people there had a tendency to look down, or, as crazy as it sounds, like, not even talk to people who were lower on the org chart. Kind of a lot of that stuff that you might hear of in big corporations is really true. And the second thing was, like, if you needed to get something done, it was really hard, which is also fine, right? When you're building airplanes, you want a lot of checks. You want a really long checklist. So I don't criticize it, but it didn't suit my personality. I've loved Atlantis because, from day one, I haven't just been in sales, I've been involved in all aspects of the company where I could prove that I was valuable. So if I had ideas for products, those get heard and they get done if they're good ideas really quickly. I essentially, I am, as a director, we'll call it top of the org chart, but it's really not like that. I mean, it's, the owner's there every day and you can walk in and say, hey, I got to talk to you. I have an idea. I have a problem. So I love that, and so it's been really interesting. So that's kind of the personal side. Atlantis has really got an interesting story. I don't know how many people know it, but our founder, like this is kind of, you call it the classic, I'll call it, they say American, but we'll say North American success story, which is our founder was a bodybuilder and he owned a little gym. And this is going back in the early 80s. He was Mr. Canada 1979 and he had a little gym. And if you go back to those days, right, there weren't gyms everywhere and different kinds of gyms and all of that. So his gym, which he owned, which was, like he said, it was like a little, 3,000 square foot, what you would call almost a personal training studio. A lot of people used to come there, especially because of the notoriety of, Mr. Canada. And what happened basically, I think a lot of great entrepreneurial stories are based on, he was just dissatisfied with the products available. He didn't think that they were right. They didn't fit right in some situations. In other situations, it was the American dollar was so strong that the cost of getting stuff was really expensive. And so he started to build his own equipment. He learned to, I forget if he learned or had someone teach him. I guess it's the same idea, but he literally started making stuff on his own for his gym. And then because people, again, people from all over would come to his gym, they're like, hey, I really like that. Could you make me one for my gym or my house or whatever? And that's kind of how we started. And I guess what happened is, Raymond, the owner, discovered he discovered his passion in life. So he stopped, competitive bodybuilding, and there are a number of reasons that he stopped. But one of the big ones was essentially, well, what does it take to be in that world, training and otherwise, we'll just say. And he wasn't willing to do that. He certainly didn't see, he's a very, one of the things that's really, that I personally like a lot with him is he has a long view. He's got that, like the tortoise and the hare, and he's the tortoise. He's always looking, yeah, that might be cool today, but what does 30 years of that look like? So he's a really moderate person. I love that. That's a level that we really get along great on. So he started building equipment and found this tremendous passion for it. And really, I mean, this word gets tossed around a lot. Passion gets tossed around a lot, and also the best. But his whole obsession was like, how do I make stuff the best? And so he started traveling and studying and what do different people do, and taking the best elements, right? And that's all this whole strength industry is really, is finding different elements that you think make sense for you or your customer and so on. And the short of it is, he moved his gym to a second floor and started manufacturing in the basement where the original gym was. Then there was a second floor to that gym. So now you had 3 floors. You had manufacturing, gym. And then the manufacturing got so good that he moved that to a place down the road. And the gym was 3 floors. And then in 1998, he moved the factory from a 10,000 square foot facility to the current facility, which is about 70,000. And I think it's just over 10 years ago, we moved our gym, which was at the time 15,000 square feet. We moved to a facility that is 50,000 square feet. I don't know if have you ever been to that one, Tony?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. Yeah.
There-
So
yeah, I will.
yeah, we had uh I mean, first of all, people love to come there. It's a fully functioning commercial gym. It's its own business entity, but of course, there are two aspects where Atlantis, the equipment manufacturer, is involved. So one is it's a showroom, so customers can come, or we have people come all the time. Hey, I'm interested in your equipment. I'd love to try it. We're like, sure, come spend a couple days working out and see what you like. And of course, the other side of it is it's a part of our design process. And I think that's fairly unique. Like, I think other people have nice showrooms and they have people, but I think, and I guess it doesn't really matter, but we have a 50,000 square foot facility with all of our equipment, with a few thousand members coming in every day, and they're testing the limits of our equipment because it's a hardcore type of user. They have ideas. We learn things, and I can share some stories of that in our conversation. And let's say, for example, we go, oh, we'd like to try this new component. We think this is good. So one example would be like the grips on machines. Well, we try it there first before we put it in the market, because we're going to find out in 6 months, we're going to find out, okay, this is good or this is not good. So that's our kind of two parts of our business now. We've got the manufacturing, and we've got this 50,000 square foot lab. I guess a lab is the best way to put it, right? And the philosophy of our owner is what happened over time, because back when back in the early days, there were other manufacturers of the same philosophy, best quality, best biomechanics, best materials, and that. What happened in our industry is what happened in a lot of industry, which is the market started to put a lot of price pressure on manufacturers. So that's one. Two is the gym industry moved towards health clubs rather than gyms. It may not be the proper term, but you get what I'm saying, right? And so a health club, like the people coming into the health club, the average person was less concerned per se with the optimal biomechanics and optimal strength curves, all the stuff that guys like yourself obsess about. That became a much smaller part of the market. And so a lot of the manufacturing moved towards how do we make it a little less costly. And I want to be clear, like, I'm not being critical of other manufacturers and saying that. They followed the market trend. You see it in many, many industries. And inevitably, manufacturing moved overseas because the labor was cheaper. And it's funny, it comes up a lot today. It wasn't a patriotic thing, right? It was the market required you to offer products at a lesser cost. So over time, a lot of those manufacturers that we kind of started with went away because it was just very difficult for them to compete and continue to innovate and continue to create great equipment. And I say this a lot today. We're kind of we're the guys who, when you go, they don't make things the way they used to, we go, we do. We've never stopped. That's kind of our thing, right? And one of the things, if I go back to manufacturing, what happens in all manufacturing, right, is the cost of labor goes up and the cost of parts go up, and so inevitably, as we talked about, labor shifts over to make overseas to make it cheaper. And the other thing that everyone does is they cheapen their product. Yeah, they cheapen their product, or they look for places where they could use common parts. That's an example. But that sometimes what gets compromised is, first of all, quality, and second of all, the you don't have the exact right part. You have the part that, well, it goes on a lot of machines. So we've never actually cheapened our product in our company. We never do that. We're doing the opposite. Raymond, again, like I say this, like it's I don't want to be too what's the word I'm looking for? Like I don't want to give too much hyperbole to it, but really like this is his art. This is his kind of thing, and there's no well we could if we change that part we could knock $100 of cost. It doesn't happen. It's the opposite. He's constantly like, oh, I saw this, and I think that would really add a lot of quality to the experience of the user or durability for the owner or that. So that's kind of who we're about. And Raymond, our founder, is one of the few people in the industry. Like I would say I don't know if there's five even, anywhere who have been a user, right? So an equipment user, an equipment designer and manufacturer, and an equipment owner for 40 plus years, right? And so when we design equipment, that's one of the things that we're bringing to the table. There's a lot of people that have ideas about, oh, you should do this and you should do that. And we take them in, like we always take them in. But what happens a lot is we'll take that in and we'll filter it. Like the idea is fantastic, but to do that, we're going to have to produce a piece at $8,000 and nobody's going to buy that. So the same guy who wants it isn't going to want it. There's three things that you have to think about when making equipment, and without trying to compromise for anyone. And that's what Raymond's been doing. And like I said, I don't know, right? I also know that. But as far as my experience, 15 years in the industry, I haven't met, four other people who can make that claim. So I've kind of rambled on now for what seems like a long time. What else what other questions can I answer?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the design process of Atlantis. Like each of the companies that I've talked to so far when it comes to things are the very high quality ones. As you mentioned, like a lot of companies, either they shift overseas for a lot of things, and by overseas, it's typically to one area of the world, which I'm trying to get people not to look at so much for just buy on price, buy on something, buy it once, use it forever. That way you don't have to redo something, you don't have to regret that purchase, you don't have to have a bad relationship with the company. So starting from the design process, like we'll use something as simple as, let's go with the squat rack, for example.
Right.
How did you guys think of going with, like, because you're one of the few companies that was using the, I believe for a while it was an 1.5-inch hole, and you had the option as well of having like the single steel post as an additional guard or an additional kind of spotter arm in there, but used for different purposes. So what kind of gave you the ideas of doing that, and as well as the different grip handles for the pull-up stations that can attach to the squat racks?
So there's a lot in there. So the basic design process, I think, is the same. Like I said, Raymond is, again, super passionate about what he does, right? And so he's always looking, and every time, whether he travels for business or for leisure, he's always like, oh, there's a gym, I'm going to pop in. What do they have there? What do we attend trade shows, we see what's going on. We don't think that we have a lot of pride in what we do. And like a lot of people with that, we're going to say, yeah, we make the best. But even that, right? Like there are other people that do great things as well. So that's one way, right? We just ourselves are out in the marketplace. And myself, so if I see something that I think is interesting, I'm gonna make notes on that or take pictures or stuff like that. My colleague, who I'm sure and tons of people know, my colleague George, who manages our international, same thing. I mean, he himself is super passionate. He's actually he's even done a couple of Charles's courses. May he rest in peace. So, that's one thing is our antennas are always up, always up. But that's one level. Second, I just mentioned, Charles Poliquin, and again, may rest in peace, was, on top of being an absolute genius, like I don't even, that's not even exaggerated because that guy was just, it was crazy how smart he was. And also him and Raymond struck up a friendship in Raymond's early days. And, Charles was a source of many ideas for us, many ideas. And it was, hey, you should do this. And so one of the things that I think, again, is great about our company and our founder is I think that he can lay claim to being the greatest designer of strength equipment in the world, in the history of the industry. I don't think he would say that. I'll say that. But there's no like, oh, I don't need to speak to, I know, and there's none of that. It's the opposite. So, and I'm sure that's, a big part of the reason that Charles had such an affinity for him was that ability to take in. So we have many great clients in the strength coach community, and we always listen and we take it in. And if we see something come up more than once, or or there's some commonalities, then we look at that, we explore that. We have the same thing in the the other area of the market where we have a lot of popularity is with old school classic type of gyms, right? Well, a lot of those guys also have tremendous ideas. So we take those ideas in from them, and I'll explain how we evaluate. And then I mentioned distributors and salespeople. So we have some ones that are highly engaged, and different salespeople like different parts of the market. But some of our salespeople that we work with bring us ideas. They're like, hey, I've seen this out there, and I think you guys could do it better. And that's our thing too, is like taking something, it's not, and what how would that be better, right? And that's how the whole market works, right? So we bring it in, and it's been relatively informal because we're small, right? It's essentially been Raymond going, I'm going to be in the back for a couple of days working with the guys, and boom, there's a prototype 3 days later. And then we'll go, okay, what do we think? We try the prototype, and then we'll put it at the gym and see what happens. Now what we're trying to do is we want to be able to not formalize, but create a bit of a bit of a more mature, I'll call it, structure to it. So actually, it's funny that you asked the question. So on Friday, myself, Raymond, and our vice president, we sat down for 3 hours going through one by one all the submissions I've gotten over the last few months, starting to work through them. Just to tell you, I got through about a quarter of them. And we've created like a filter of like 7 questions that we ask, right? And then the next phase will be, okay, some are like, okay, we've got to do a bit of research. This looks like a good idea, but what's the marketability of it, right? And we'll go through that. And then the other thing that we are probably going to do is build an advisory panel, right? And how exactly we're going to do that, like, is it going to be, we don't know. So I won't even speak of exactly, but basically creating a criteria and then going, okay, we have an idea. The panel gets the idea. And then we go, okay, what's the feedback? And let's say the panel is 7 people. So, well, we're going to make some kind of criteria that says, well, look, if we don't have 5 out of 7 that think this is a good idea, we're not going to proceed with the idea. The idea being, of course, that your panel is reflective of your market, right? Yeah. So I kind of see 2 panels, because there's going to be the strength coach market, right? The sports performance and that. And I think the hardcore gym and finding some clients. And I think sometimes there's crossover. Now I'll be honest with you, that's my vision for how we would do it, which was proposed recently to Raymond. we'll probably massage it, but I think that's where we're headed because we're realizing, like I said, we tried to go through that backlog on Friday, and it was with so many ideas being passed along to us. You need a formal structure to cope with them, and if you don't, it doesn't work. So again, does that answer your question? I don't know.
Oh yeah, it does. So it's
I
like
know.
using what you just kind of said there. So for
Yeah,
people who are watching this, just on Atlantis Strength's website
yeah,
for their power racks, there are 12 different options
yeah,
of chin-up attachments for the rack.
yeah,
Not one, two, or three. There's
yeah,
12 different options.
yeah.
And of that, for the power rack accessories, that's 12 out of the 31 accessories for the racks. So this
Right,
is everything from jammer arms, dip stations, step up stations, uh, bar, not bar racks, but like jerk block spots. So it's lots of thought process has gone into each of these for them to even have 12 different chin up options. And then when you look at that, and then as you were saying, coach is looking at strength curves and stuff. One of the big things Atlantis is known for within the strength coach community is extremely high quality cable machines, such as your prone leg curls, your kneeling leg curls, your functional trainer. So one of the things I find unique about Atlantis is instead of it always just being like a cable necessarily, it's almost more like I think it's a Kevlar belt almost for some of your machines. So what kind of went into the process of determining, okay, using the Kevlar belt as opposed to a wire cable for XYZ machine?
right. So Kevlar and polyamide belts were originally what were used. And that was the simple, we're always asking there's two things. What's going to give the machine the best performance, right? So what's going to make it move as smoothly as possible? And then what's going to be the most durable, right? And for the longest time, belts and polyamide and Kevlar belts was the answer. If you look at our stuff now, almost nothing is belt anymore. It's moved to cable, and the reason is, and this is again the continuous improvement and the constant focus on the quality. The cables today, a thin cable today has way more tensile strength than a cable 20 years ago. And because of that, you're able to use a cable that has the same strength as the belt used to. But the cable, one, it's much easier to pat when you're going through a lot of pulleys on certain pieces. You want the thing to be as supple as possible. And with belts, right? Belts are like this. So if you're passing through a cable and now the belt is like that, it's just not as optimal a feeling. And so it's very recent, but in recent years we've moved to cable for that reason because we've paid attention and you're able to do that. And what we also like, and this is the rare occasion where this has happened, right? Because I said before, we don't cheapen our products, but in this case, it is actually less expensive for the cable, but it took that cable getting to the point of being the same, better performance and higher level of tensile strength for us to do it. And the reason, and this comes back to, remember I was talking about the three, call it the circles, right? There's three constituents. As a club owner, I've lowered the cost of ownership. So it's actually, that move is not based on, oh, we want to, take quality out of our product. No, it's that the quality of a cheaper component gives you the performance of what a component 20 years ago gave you. So that's what went into it from the cable perspective. At the end of the day, there's and this I think is very unique to us too. Our only thing we look at is the performance of the machine. That's it. There's no, if you look at the health club market, you go into a club and like all the weight stacks are the same height, right? That's an aesthetic consideration. And it's a valid consideration for some people when they walk into a club, a certain type of client, they love that. That makes them feel at ease. We've just chosen to not consider that because as soon as you decide to consider something else, your sole focus is not, there's no such thing as their sole focus. And we've decided it's performance. Performance is the movement, right? This, you could call it the strength curve or the biomechanics. The comfort's really important too, because if it's biomechanically correct but uncomfortable, the user's not going to be happy. The sturdiness, excuse me. So that's a big part of it too. It's like, right, and strength coaches especially, like they want their clients on a machine and that machine is sturdy. And then of course the long-term cost of ownership, durability. So those four considerations, that's our process. We only consider that. Coming back to the squat racks and the chin-ups, that's a trend. It's certainly not a trend. We started with that. I'll bring them up again. The late Charles Poliquin was the one who came to us and told us, you should do those fat grips. So he was behind that. And again, that speaks to, we're smart enough to associate with smart people and build great relationships with those people. So I think that answers what you're saying.
And like one thing that anybody globally who has used, just because it's a simple thing to always bring up, has used an Atlantis leg curl or an Atlantis twin pulley will be able to say is it moves freaking smooth. It doesn't have like a certain spot where all of a sudden it's just like it yanks up. It's really easy. It moves easy. Well, depending on the weight on there, it might not move so easy, but it moves how it should feel like it should move. If you're bending your knee, it feels just how you should be bending your knee. Yes, it's going to have resistance to it, but it's not like you get to a certain point and all of a sudden that resistance picks up tenfold,
right?
And then go an extra millimeter and there's no resistance. It stays consistent. The twin pulleys, whenever you're pulling on it, it's not like it all of a sudden accelerates. It stays nice and smooth through the whole movement. And that's one thing that anytime I've used Atlantis, it feels excellent to use. You've also, as you were saying, the strength coach, you have the strength coaches, personal training gyms. One of the big markets for you guys that seems to have really exploded, along with your colleague George Gallareghi, is the international market. Even though you're made in Canada, yes, they make their equipment in Canada. Your equipment is to the far reaches of the world, whether it's in Nick Mitchell's facilities, or you're in Kelly Martinovich's facility in Perth, Australia, or you're at Raw in Hong Kong, you're in Santo Domingo, you're all around the world in some of the highest quality and the highest or the best training facilities around the world. So how is it that you've been able to focus so well on that market and do so well with those communities? Because when they're buying something, they have to also factor in shipping, where it's got to get on a boat. And one thing Atlantis does is they don't send piece of equipment in pieces.
No.
They send the piece of equipment whole, so it takes up a little more volume. So it might take 2 containers, whereas another company, it might take them a half container because it's all in boxes.
So that's first of all, I want to touch on that last point, and then I'll answer your question. Remember, in my previous little rant, I talked about sole focus, right? So there's another thing. We don't build equipment thinking, how are we going to be able to ship this in boxes and cheaply? And I want to again reiterate, because I want to be very clear that I'm not saying why I think we're great at the expense of other companies. I'm saying what we do. It's sole focus. There are a lot of people in the market that are more price sensitive, and therefore they are very happy to pay lower shipping costs. And so that is a good consideration for a company. It's not ours because the only thing we care about is the quality of the movement and to the highest level, right? Let's be honest. There are some people that don't know and don't care and don't need to know, and there's a part of that. Like, that's not us. As far as the international market, I can kind of say one thing and I can't say another. The first part of it is, if you look at a lot of that, it's driven by, I would say we're a niche company. And like a lot of niche companies in the high quality sphere, it's word of mouth, right? And so I would guess that a lot of these people are attending seminars. Certainly many of them were attending. Charles used to do seminars all over the world and attract people from all over the world. We did a strength seminar with Charles and a few other of his top students, a
And
couple, Ben and Dave and Preston. Yeah, all three guys are actually, I'm very fortunate to say that they're my customers and they're my friends too. Very fortunate. I love those guys. And again, examples of guys that have helped so much in the same passion and the feedback. So word gets out, and the world is huge, but it's small today. And I think a lot of that is that. How have we leverage that and scale that is a question for my colleague George. That's his game. He does a great job, obviously, but that's not something that I'm deeply knowledgeable about. But for sure, if you look, the commonality is these are the people that care. We care about quality and only quality, and that's the tendency of those people is probably the same, right? I saw you had, if I'm not mistaken, your last interview was with Tom Grace, right?
Tom was 2 weeks ago, and
2 weeks ago.
Watson from Watson last week.
So Tom Grace and his product is a perfect example. You're not buying that because it's comparable in price to, you're buying that because that guy makes the most ridiculously awesome product, and you don't care. It's not money. It's not a frivolous kind of, I don't care about the cost. Everyone cares. But the first thing is, I want what I think is the top, right?
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of our clients are both clients of Tom's and clients of ours, because Tom makes a product at that level. So that's my answer, right? Internationally, it doesn't matter. We find those people in all corners, and you'd be surprised. I've even found some in markets like the condo market, people developing multi-housing condos, which you would never think they would want to pay the premium, but the person there happens to be an aficionado. And I think that's part of it, right? Like, I think your circle,
Yep.
They pride themselves on being aficionado. They spare no expense to become highly educated, right? That's the type of person that I think is probably in your group here, in this Q&A, is they hold themselves first to an extremely high standard. They pride themselves on being really educated. And of course, that leads to, understanding the difference between this leg curl and that leg curl.
So for those watching this right now, just out in the previous Q&As with other equipment manufacturers, I'm not talking to budget manufacturers. I'm talking to manufacturers who are putting out the highest quality equipment only. I don't care about the Amazon special crap that's out there that's going to break after 3 uses. This is stuff where, as I said earlier, buy it once, use it forever, and then down the road, that money that you would have had to spend on buying it again, now you can buy something additional to go with it that's going to complement it instead of having to replace it. That's one of the great things about Atlantis' stuff. Another thing that Atlantis has is options on frame and upholstery coloring options, as well as branding for gyms. So what kind of made you guys actually offer the branding option on the upholstery? Because that's something that I think is fairly new from you guys?
Well, I don't know fairly. I mean, I've been like that's been there as long as I have. It's just become more. But we do it so much more now than when I started. It's more that. Yeah, we've always done it. It's a super cool thing. And it was something that we realized was actually relatively inexpensive to offer because it's not like when you're doing, let's say, a custom paint and let's say your own custom shroud, which you see stuff like that depending on the size of your order, and with printing, like you've got to create like the dye and all that. It can be really, really expensive. So our upholstery thing, it's really not expensive, right? It's something that you can offer the customer, right? And it's to make the plate. And I wish I knew who came up with that idea. I don't. It was just there when I showed up. But we are doing it more and more. We offer it more and more because that's a big thing, even in the club industry, right? When I started 15 years ago, when I would walk in the back of the warehouse, pretty much 90% of the equipment was, gray, silver with black upholstery or some other upholstery. And then 10% was white. And that was for people who had a gym full of white equipment that were adding pieces. That was it. And, what's happened, especially, people have decided to brand strength equipment. Even not good strength equipment still lasts, longer than cardio. And so people are like, you know what? Let's get my colors on this. What does it cost? It costs a few $1,000s for a full gym, let's say. But, so that started to become more of a trend where people want to brand themselves. And so the upholstery thing is something we've started to you just start to mention it. And it's almost right. It's our version of would you like fries with that? It's kind of that where we're like, hey, by the way, but we think it's cool. Like we've done some and they just come out so beautiful. And, it doesn't bother us that it's not our logo and it's the customer's logo because it's just a beautiful thing. So people are starting to tune into that as well, right? How do I brand myself? So even in the space, if I'm a coach that's opening my own place, right? It's not the same as it was when I started. You just, you buy your place, you paint the walls, and you really have to create an experience at every last level. And so there's a color palette and, like any company, it's like, these are my 3 colors and they've got to be in everything. And it's just become more and more prevalent. And so because of that, our logo, which has been around forever, has just become a thing that people are like, oh, I love that. And again, word gets out. So if I talk about, and this is, in some ways relevant to any of your listeners who are operating because you have strength coaches that are associated, I'm sure some are with athletic programs, and then you have some strength coaches here that they own their own business. How I sell today is not how I sold 15 years ago, because customers, there's a more direct connection with customers. So even though I work through distributors, which is fine because your distributors are out there on the road and they're building the brand, and there's a lot to be said for working with someone who's in your region. There's a lot of value provided by that, but a lot of times we work in tandem because the customer reaches out to me on Facebook and they're, hey, can I ask you to, and for sure. So there's a lot more direct connection with clients and everybody sees everything. And, so that changes a lot of how things are done from a sales perspective. And, so colors have become a big part of that, logos, making sure everything is like that.
See, that's pretty cool how that kind of, it's not like you guys planned for it. It's just kind of happened and it's grown, especially, I would say, probably more so on the private training side of things, because people want, in the age of social media, people want their image to be projected forward. There's nothing wrong with that. It's smart to do. It's better than, oh, this person's taking a picture, and everyone who sees that picture, especially say that random person taking that picture and posting it has 2 million Instagram followers. Oh, where was that picture taken? Well, if your logo's front and center and they can recognize that, then it's enough that they could just Google it. Hey, they might be able to find you. Next thing you know, you get the knock on your door. So that's really cool though, how that kind of all gelled in there, as well as the coloring. Uh, One thing that Atlantis is also known to be able to do for their customers that you're never going to get from a budget equipment manufacturer is, I'll use Preston Green and the Florida Gators as an example. Equipment that is bigger or smaller is also an option with Atlantis based on based on space constraints. If you've got a lower ceiling, like the stock size of your squat racks is either eight or
Eight or
nine
nine,
feet.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're dealing with basketball players, even that 10-foot high rack still might be too short for them to be doing certain movements. Like they can reach there and they're still standing straight up on the floor if they're trying to do a chin up. So they might need a rack that's 10 feet high.
Right.
And if they're all 7-footers, they need a rack 11 feet high.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the value. One of the things that I think we do great, if I'm going to be a bit boastful, is, we have the nimble ability to customize of a small manufacturer, but our service level, and I don't just say this, I know this because remember, all my distributors, they don't just carry Atlantis, or some only carry Atlantis, but others carry multiple brands, normal. And I'm always, hey, how did this guy do it? How does that guy do it? What do they do? What's the standard for this? When they ship to you, what are they? I'm taking all that in, and I can tell you that our level of service that we offer, meaning when I say service, I don't mean you have a problem and you call in. That's one level. I mean the process by which you can get your order in via our distributors, right? Get an order in, get it processed, know what's happening, know when you're getting it. All this thing that you think is so obvious that isn't so obvious when you're not buying something on Amazon today, right? That's why is Amazon so big, is like it's unbelievable. Click, click, and you get a notice when it leaves and you get a notice when it's, we're very good at both. Coming back to the customization in Preston, it's a perfect example of relying on associating with great people. Preston, obviously, was one of the best students of Charles, and is an incredible strength coach in his own right, and is a great guy. Like, he's just such an easy guy to work with. So he called me one day and he's like, listen, I got some of your products that I want to put in here, but they're too small. And his problem was even more interesting because he wasn't just basketball. He had I forget, but he had one of the women's varsity teams that he also was coaching. And so he's like, I've got like 5'1" girls and 6'10" guys. And he's like, can you guys solve that problem for me? And we went in back and we started to play and developed some products that are, were made specifically for him. And about 2 years ago, another young strength coach at the University of Houston basketball, his name's Alan Bishop, and great guy. And he and I forget if it was when we saw each other in person but he's like, I need a hack squat for my guys. What can you do? We just went in back and started to figure it out. And we built him a hack squat that's good enough for his guys. It's got the length to it. And in fact, we've had a couple more of his colleagues, peers, reach out to us and buy that same piece. Again, it comes down to, I've extolled the virtues of Raymond, my boss and friend for 15 years. And I do think he's brilliant in strength equipment design. But again, that's not something he was ever going to come up with. You still gotta have smart friends, and we consider ourselves to really be lucky to have some really smart friends that are always happy to work with us and solve problems. So that's how that's come up. a lot of those. The basketball one to me is the most interesting one. But yeah, we have other people that call us. They're like, I love your squat rack, but I've got an 8 foot ceiling, so I can't have an 8 foot rack. We're like, okay, we can do 7.5 feet. You want a 7 feet? What do you want? You know, and that's the small part of us. But the execution is going to be big. You know, the execution is going to be proper and really good for people. You got to make it easy for people to buy. You don't want to, leave a deposit and then don't hear from someone for 3.5 months and like, hey, what's going on with my equipment? Happens a lot. Like, I'm surprised by it because I'm very, like I always do things with the mind of the customer too, of like, hey, I believe this. It's somewhat, I don't know if it's utopian's a word, but like you're in the bit, like you get money, you get paid to make people's lives better, right? And I don't mean that in some like woo woo kind of way. I mean, like, nobody's giving you their hard-earned money if you don't make their life better. And part of it is, yes, you've got to deliver something, but you also have to make sure that the whole way through, from the time they say yes until the time they get it and for the years that they own it, right? And so I'm shocked. I've been told stories about like people who buy stuff and it's like they don't hear anything and that. So we're big. We're a big company in that regard. We make sure that our customers are informed. And yeah, the customization is the fun part of being small.
See, that's good. As we kind of wrap everything up here with Yossi, what would you, Yossi, say would be the number one focus for people to look at when they're deciding on Atlantis for their gym purchases?
I think it comes down to what I said, is like the performance of the product, right? Like, that's at the end of the day, you're looking for how does that product perform in terms of for the user and in terms of for the owner, right? You want to have both. And you also want to look at, I say this a lot to clients, of course, I never tell anyone what to do with their money. It's way too personal. And I would never tell anyone, what's worth their money. What I will tell you is always look at not just the cost to take the money out of your pocket today, but what's the cost over time of ownership, right? So, if and it goes with just about anything, right? I'm going to own this for 15 years. Therefore, it's X dollars a year more to have this. Is it worth that? It's a good way to mentally think about things, because sometimes you look at something up front and you're like, wow. You're like, right. But what's the value in every day, every rep? Like you gave our leg curl, which is, what's the value of every rep for 15 years being perfection? And then decide from there. You may decide it's not worth a difference, but I think that's really key. So I think, I know you said one thing, but it's hard, I apologize. That's how I would wrap it up.
Yeah. All right. So now, Yossi, this is where you get to kind of plug yourself, Atlantis Strength. How can people get in touch with you? And also, how can people follow you and Atlantis on social channels?
So given that you see my name, Yossi Connect, I am very searchable on social media. That's one of the few benefits of having a name that's so difficult to pronounce and all that. AtlantisStrength.com is our website. We have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram page, so you can follow us all there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. So, pretty easy to find us, I think. We also have a great YouTube channel, some really nice videos on there. So those are all the different ways. Internationally, it's my colleague, but of course, if someone here is from the international market and they reach out to me, it's no problem. I'll make the introduction. My colleague George he's phenomenal as well. Knows he's been with the company a couple of years longer than I have. Like I said, he's done he's done a couple certifications, and I think he's pretty well known in the community as well. So I'm sure he's easily reachable, but that would be Hal, I guess.
All right. So I'm personally going to thank you for the time that you've given me.